Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa and welcome to Threshold of Hope, our program where we bring you the writings of Pope John Paul the Great. Before we get to our emails, I want to remind you that today is the feast of St. Faustina Kowalska. She was born in 1905 and died in 1938, just 33 years old. She received a number of revelations from Christ. And the core of it is that Christ is the divine mercy. And what's striking to me is that she received this during a time of mercilessness. You know, during her adulthood, the communists already took over Russia. And then the Nazis invaded Poland 1 year after she died. The mercilessness of the atheists was something that ran rampant across the world. And we saw the horrors of it. But she calls us to pray for mercy for those people, to pray that God's mercy would be on them too. And Pope John Paul learned a lot about it from her indirectly, because he was made basically a slave laborer for the Nazis at a quarry. And it was just across the railroad tracks from the grave of Sister Kowalska, Sister Faustina Kowalska. And he would pass by her grave every day. And while he was working there, they began to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet in the chapel there. So he began to learn about the Divine Mercy there, at that chapel. And not only did he beatify and canonize her, but he also began to teach us. Remember, one of the encyclicals we did about 8 years ago was Rich in Mercy. And that influenced his thought quite a bit. Now, if you are interested, I've got a DVD that I did. It's called Reminders of God's Love, the Sacred Heart and the Divine Mercy, showing some of the connection between the Sacred Heart and the Divine Mercy. And you can go to my website, which is fathermitchpacwa.org. And the word Father is spelled out, fathermitchpacwa.org. And you can get it there and order that. And I think you'll like it. We filmed it in Poland, including with a nice interview with Father Groschel right in Sister Faustina's room. So that was kind of cool. Oh, almost forgot emails. I'll do that sitting down. Normally I stand, but we'll take care of them now. Remember, you can send emails by writing to threshold@EWTN.com. And by the way, before I answer these emails, I want to thank you for all the different remedies. Now, because I've got this acid reflux. And I'm taking them one at a time. I can't do quite all of them at once, but I'll do the ones that I can. And I definitely noticed some improvement. I just won't say which one it is. All right. Dear Father Mitch, my question has to do with a pastor who recently stated in a homily that he had heard a general confession of a non-Catholic and gave him absolution. Is this an invalid absolution? I think it is very misleading to say this without explanation to a congregation who might now think that the church can officially give absolution to a person no matter if he is Catholic or not. God bless you, a Texas fan. Well, dear Texas fan, first of all, you're correct that it's misleading not to give an explanation. He should have said why he did this. And there are circumstances when a priest can give absolution to a non-Catholic, a Protestant. If the Protestant is in danger of death and asks for confession, I can't go around asking them, hey, you Protestants want to go to confession. Now, that would not be correct. But if the Protestant asks and expresses faith that the priest has authority to absolve sins, then it's, especially if the person is in danger of death, then it is legitimate to hear someone's confession. Now, I don't know all that was going on in the situation, neither do you, and I trust that Father was careful about this, but that would be the thing that you have to keep in mind. That there are circumstances, but it's usually in extremis. That is, if somebody's in danger of death. Another one, Dear Father Pacwa, an agnostic friend asked me, can God do anything? I replied, of course. He then asks, can he make a rock so big you can't pick it up? The question really worried me as I did not know how to answer him. Can you suggest an answer, please? My husband, John, and I love your series. Claire in New South Wales, Australia. Well, Claire, good day, and good on you. First of all, God can do anything except the foolish. And this idea that he would, or even think about creating a rock he can't lift is an absurdity. And so he's not going to do the absurd. And that's why, you don't, this person is asking you a question about absurdity. And you don't have to respond to absurdity. And I would tell him, why are you trying to push something that is absurd? God is not absurd. He's wise. Not a wise guy. He's wise. And so trust in his wisdom. Now, he can do anything that is rationally coherent. He can do things beyond reason, but what he does is still rationally coherent. And to create a stone bigger than he can lift is irrational. So you don't need to say anything more than that to the man. And then finally, dear Father Mitch, the Michaelite fathers from Poland, speaking on angels on EWTN Live, said that there are only 3 angels are named from the Bible: Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael. Where did the names Yehudiel, Uriel, Barachiel, and Sealtiel come from? They are listed on a number of websites. Madonna. Well, Uriel comes from the book of either 4th Esdras or there might be another book that it's from. But some of these names come from books that never made it into anybody's Bible. Okay? So they're not in the Bible. And these books contain the names of some archangels, but we don't include them because they're not in the Bible. Also, some of them come from Jewish traditions, that there's some Jewish traditions about the names of archangels. Now, Pope Zachary, who lived in the 8th century, had dealt with this because a lot of Catholics were starting to call on the names of these angels that are not found in Scripture. And what he said for us to do is stick only with the names of angels who are found in sacred Scripture, not with the angels from outside the Bible. It's 2nd Esdras is Uriel. Uriel's 2nd Esdras. Barachiel, Sealtiel, Yehudiel are from Jewish rabbinic sources. So Pope Zachary said not to use it, and also a synod held at Aix-les-Chapelles, also in 1789, I believe, also rejected using any other names of angels. And the Catholic Church also, as we said on that program, and I would say again, the Catholic Church urges us not to name our guardian angels. There is a directory of popular spirituality that's put up by the Vatican. You can get on our EWTN website. And in there, it discourages us. It tells us not to. In fact, doesn't just discourage, but tells us not to name our own guardian angels. Somebody has sent an email about that as well. And I just wanted to respond to that email in addition while talking about this. All right? Well, let's now take a look at the document. We're in the document called Vita Consecrata, which means consecrated life. Now, you can get a free electronic copy of this at our website, which is EWTN.com. Go to the television tab of the website and then click television series. Scroll down to Threshold of Hope, click there, and you'll see that this document is linked and you can download it into your computer. That way you can either read along with us on your computer or you can print it out and read it that way. If you want to print it out, you got to pay for your own paper. All right. Now, we are on paragraph 43. And this is dealing with the very important task of authority in consecrated life. So for those who are in religious orders and institutes, there is authority, there are superiors. And this is a very important role. In the consecrated life, the role of superiors, including local superiors, has always been of great importance for the spiritual life and for mission. One of the reasons it's important for mission is that the superior is the one who assigns the members of the community to their jobs. So my superior, my provincial, assigned me to come teach here at EWTN. So I don't just say, oh, I got a job, let me go. I've got to ask permission. And then if he gives me permission, he does the assigning. And he made that very clear when he assigned me, that we have official bulletins in the order that he missioned me here. In these years of change and experimentation, since the Vatican Council, we've had a lot of changes in religious life and a lot of experiments, some of which have worked very nicely, some of which have not. As is always the case with experiments. One of my buddies had a chemistry set, and I used to like to try experiments, only I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't about to read the instructions. So I would mix chemicals in some remote hope of an explosion, which never occurred, by the way. And if it did occur, I don't know what I would have done. But sometimes people were experimenting with religious life in the same way I was experimenting with my friend's chemistry set, looking for an explosion, but not knowing if anything's going to happen. And there's a need to revise the office of superior. This has sometimes been felt, but it should not be. But it should be recognized that those who exercise authority cannot renounce their obligation as those first responsible for the community, and their responsibility as guides of their brothers and sisters in the spiritual and apostolic life. You know, some communities have gotten rid of the idea of superiors, and they talk about presidents instead. And they don't have any authority. You know, they gave up their authority. What the Pope is saying, this is not a healthy thing for religious life. And in fact, as far as I know, the communities I'm aware of who have gotten rid of superiors and have just, sort of figureheads, they're not growing. They're not getting members to join them. There's a need for that structure, the way that my body needs to have a skeleton. It's good. If I didn't have a skeleton, I'd be one of those chickens that are boneless. And I don't want to be a boneless chicken. This is something that you want to have, that gives you structure and order. And that's where the role of superior comes in. Now, I say that as a former superior. I was superior of a house of about 20 men. And it's very important to have the superior acting like a superior, like he's got to make decisions for the community, and as well as the community supporting that role of superior. Because if they just say, well, we're not going to listen, then that's your open rebellion, and that's not going to bring growth to the community either. In an atmosphere strongly affected by individualism, this is one of the things that we have strongly in our country. As a matter of fact, on my same website, fathermitchpacwa.org, I have another CD that you may find helpful about individualism. It's called, it's about individualism and pluralism, and it deals with relativism. And it's called Relativism and the Three Ugly Sisters. Among the ugly sisters of relativism is individualism, where every individual does his or her own thing. If everybody's doing their own thing, nothing gets done in common. And you can't agree. And one of the things I try to talk about is that it ends up being might makes right. If everybody's doing their own individualistic thing, then how are you going to talk about anything? You have no basis for a conversation. So we've got this very strongly in our culture today. And it's not an easy thing to foster recognition and acceptance of the role of authority as the benefit for everybody. Again, a lot of people say, I've got to be me. To quote the great Frank Sinatra, whom I like, but he's not a great philosopher. Great voice, not a great philosopher. I got to be me is not the battle cry of religious, nor of the priesthood for that matter, nor of husbands and wives for that matter. You know, there's a sense in which you got to be we. You know, that's part of marriage, isn't it? Well, same with religious life. Nevertheless, its importance must be reaffirmed as essential for a strengthening fraternal communion. In other words, having superiors is essential. You can't get rid of it, again, any more than you can healthily get rid of your skeleton. You can get rid of your skeleton, but you won't be in good health afterwards. In order, also, in religious life and consecrated life, you profess a vow of obedience. If you don't have superiors, what good is the vow of obedience? It means nothing. That's like saying, I take a vow to my spouse. Well, if you don't have a spouse, then what good is that vow? It's silly. It's silly. Well, authority must above all be fraternal and spiritual. And that's a very important point, that when I was superior, I also had to be a brother to my other brothers in the community. You know, I'm not the one who gets a voice directly from God and then just says, you shall shine my shoes. No, that's not what it's about. It's not for them to serve me. I'm there to serve them as a superior, as all superiors. They're there to serve the rest of the community. But while it is to be fraternal, and that you really care for the brothers and sisters in the community, and have a spiritual quality about it, still, those who are entrusted with authority, the superiors in the community, have to know how to involve their brothers and sisters in the decision-making process. And so that's one of the things I would have to do. You know, at community meetings, I would call them together and get their input. And that's very important. I mean, I appreciated their input very much. But still, I had the final word. I had to say how it's going to be. After getting all their input, they didn't always agree among themselves, but somebody had to make a decision. And so, after listening to their input, the final word belongs to the superior, to the authority, and therefore that authority has a right to see that decisions are respected. So that's one of the things that's very important. And this is something in the Congregation for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies, fraternal life in the community, that they emphasize that as well. All right. Now paragraph 44. Caring for the elderly and the sick. Oh, wait, no, there's, sorry, I missed, I want to get that footnote. I didn't get all of it there. There's some elements of that footnote on fraternal life and community. And one of the things it says is, first, the Christian community is not an anonymous collective, but it is endowed from the beginning with leaders for whom the apostles ask consideration, respect, and charity. Authority is evangelically always service. That's key about being a leader. And you priests, are you in parishes? Yes. And you know that's part of your job in the parish. You know that you're there to be a leader and have authority in making some decisions that are very important, but it's at the service of the parish. And again, this is what parents do with their children. You make decisions for the kids. You can't get a driver's license until you graduate high school, because you know your child may not be mature enough at 16. Maybe they are, then you let them get one. Maybe they're not, so you don't. You know, that's a decision you have to make. But you have to make those decisions as parents, so also superiors. It goes on. The authority of a superior works so that the religious house is not merely a place of residence, a collection of subjects, each of whom lives an individual history, but it's a fraternal community in Christ. See, that's one of the dangers. If you don't have the superior forming a focal point, the house can be like a hotel. And, can't that happen in families too? If the parents aren't taking leadership, the kids come in and get calories and then go back out to their different activities. But somebody has to say, no, we're going to have a family meal together every day. And we talk to each other. And we listen to each other. And you better be there. 6 o'clock, we had to be home. There was no way around missing the dinner. I might have wanted to play more baseball or something, but that was irrelevant. It was time to be in the house. Fortunately, all my buddies had parents of the same mentality. So all of us had to be in by 6 o'clock anyway. All right, now we'll deal with paragraph 44. And this is on the role of the elderly. Now, caring for the elderly and the sick has an important place in the fraternal life, especially in communities. Especially at times like the present, when in some parts of the world, the percentage of elderly consecrated persons is increasing. In our country, the majority of nuns are well over 60. As a matter of fact, I think the majority is closer to 70 and above. That's the situation that's going on. Not in all orders. The order of the Dominican Sisters of Our Lady of the Eucharist, the average age is something like 29. And that's the only reason it's that high is that the superior is so old. Are you listening, sister? Mother, sometimes you ain't listening to me. Actually, I only said that because she said it on the show herself. I'm not that dumb. The care and concern which these persons deserve arises not only from a clear obligation of charity and gratitude, but also from an awareness that their witness greatly serves the church and its own institutes. Now, that's very important. Our older guys stay in their communities until they need nursing care. As long as we can, we keep them in our houses. And so, I had guys, when I was a superior, I had one man who was 81 and a couple in their 70s. And, it was a delight to have them because of what he says here, that it's good for us that they give a witness, and their witness serves the church. It serves us. And so it's a very important witness that they give, and it's meritorious. Even when for reasons of age or infirmity, they've had to abandon their specific apostolate. Now, these guys didn't have to do that. The old guys in my community were continuing to do work. One guy was a recovering alcoholic. He had been in recovery for 20-some years. And he was still working as an alcoholic counselor, going out and counsel other alcoholics and doing fantastic work. Now, age changes things. And I had to take away his keys to his car. He couldn't drive anymore because he had macular degeneration. He said, but I see fine off the side. And I said, that's good. As soon as cars start driving sideways, you can have the keys back. Until then, give me the keys. But, we made sure that he either took a cab or took the subway or the bus and got to go to the places where he wanted to go because he was so effective. And as an elderly priest, who had a great line, by the way, on his 81st birthday, he says, I don't feel 81. So I said to him, Father Bob, you've never been 81 in your life. How do you know how it feels like until today? This is it. This is it. He was a fun guy to have in the community. The elderly and the sick have a great deal to give in wisdom and experience to the community. If only the community can remain close to them with concern and an ability to listen. And that's one of the things I wanted, for those guys to come to the community meetings, be there at community meals, and be part of the community because, we learn a lot from them. And even the community that we have, that is for our guys who are in nursing care, The provincial wants us to go visit them if we get a chance. I know a lot of them watch these programs. And, they are a great witness in their disability even. Some of them are bedridden, some of them are mobile, varying stages of abilities. But they are a great benefit to the rest of us in the society. And there's some guys who are still in their 90s and are still working jobs. I have nothing but the highest admiration for them. There's one priest I've known since I was a college student. He was the college vice president and became president. He's still working. This is something I find so admirable. More than in any activity, the apostolate consists in the witness of one's own complete dedication to the Lord's saving will. See, it's not just a job you do. When you're in the apostolate, it's also the witness that you give of your own dedication. And that's as important as the job that you get done. And a dedication nourished by the practice of prayer and penance. Because prayer has to go into what you do in your work. The elderly are called in many ways to live out their vocation. First, by persevering prayer. They have to be very prayerful themselves. As a matter of fact, for the men who are at our nursing situation, our nursing community, their job description is orat, pro ecclesia et societatem. They pray for the church and the society. That's their assignment. That's just not a nice thing. That's their job. Also, by patient acceptance of their condition, which a lot of them have to do. They're patients with being debilitated. That's one of the things they accept. And the readiness to serve as spiritual directors, confessors, or mentors in prayer. This is also a great part of their task, for the rest of the community. And because, I've had some of these older priests as my confessors and spiritual directors. And, they've seen it all, so, you don't surprise them anymore. and it's really great to be able to go to confession to them because they have wisdom and they teach me how to be a better confessor. So this is a great thing to have from them. All right. We're going to take a little break. We'll come back in a couple minutes. We'll get questions from our studio audience and then continue on with this document, so please stay with us. Thank you. Welcome back. We have a nice group of folks here. First of all, one large group from Granite City, Illinois, over not too far away from St. Louis. And we've got a few individuals from the Republic of Texas and the great state of New York, the Empire State, and a few others from different places. And we're delighted to have them here. And we'd love to have you come and join us as well. It always makes it a lot more fun for me if you guys are here in the studio audience. So if you can make it on a pilgrimage, either as an individual or a family, or as a group from a parish or other group, please contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. That's 205-271-2966. Or go to our website, www.ewtn.com. And they'll help you with all kinds of information about where you can stay, what the schedules are for masses here and up in Hansville, the schedule for programs, tours of the network. Have you gone on a tour yet? Oh, good. Have you had fried green tomatoes yet? Oh, my word. You got to get the fried green tomatoes and get to our religious restaurants. Hamburger heaven. Because they're all dead. But very happy. and Golden Rule Barbecue. See, even the religious, they're all right here in Irondale, so the religious theme is very important. All right, now let's take a look at some questions we have from the studio. Let's start off with this lady here. Ma'am, where are you from?
Granite City, Illinois.
Great, and what is your question?
What is the difference between superiors and administrators?
An administrator is going to be doing a function. And the administrator will do the function of taking care of the physical plant and the everyday running of things, whereas a superior is going to have a vow relationship with the community so that the community owes the superior obedience. And so that'll be a very important distinction. They may not owe any obedience to the administrator, but they do so to the superior because there's a relationship. It'd be not too different from the difference between having a wife and hiring a cook. Now, a wife might cook for you, and a cook might cook for you, but you're not married to the cook. She's doing the job. Your wife is doing something out of love for you. Does that help?
Certainly.
All right, good. And we have another question. Father, where are you from?
Pastor of St. Elizabeth in Granite City.
Okay, good. So you brought these folks
Yes, I did.
down here. Great. And what's your question?
It seems like a lot of communities have de-emphasized authority over the last few years, and I just was wondering, is there any things that you think they can do to try to get back on track of what Pope John Paul II was talking about?
The first thing, to get back on track with having authority and superiors, they have to want to have them. That's going to be the first step. They have to see that there's a need. That's what, like he's trying to bring out. He wants us to see that there's a need for having superiors. So they have to see the need and have to say, okay, we want to get back to that because this was how our community grew. And since we stopped having superiors, we're not growing anymore. So let's get back to what we should be doing. But they have to want it. And then they have to be willing to submit to superiors. And I would have them dust off old copies of their Constitution. Now, some of them have changed the Constitution of their order. And they may need to bring back the older Constitution or some form of it and make sure that the role of superiors, because most of the rules for religious orders, in canon law at least, but also in the constitutions, are to protect the members from the superiors, ironically. Because, you could become abusive, as a superior. That's possible to anybody in power. Power can corrupt. That's an old saying. But an absolute power can corrupt absolutely, so there has to be a limit to the power. And that's very useful. But that would be the way that they'd have to go about it. And that would take a conversion back. And there was a conversion away from it. Now they'd have to have a conversion back to having superiors. It won't be easy, but it'd be possible. And I know that the orders which have a clear community life, superiors, and wear habits, and have a community life together, they're growing. They're growing. For a while they were not, but now they're back to growing again. And it's really neat. And this last trip that I had, I went to Lincoln, Nebraska recently, and I saw two nuns in habits, one going there, one coming back. They weren't going there. They were on different flights. But seeing nuns in their habits was just a good thing to do. You just recognized, yeah, I know who they are. And sister, salute. All right? I have another question. Sir, where are you from?
We're from Fort Worth, Texas, Father.
Great. I'll be coming out that way. I think the second week in November. I'll be in Dallas area.
Well, a white tailor are going to be waiting for you, Father.
I'll be looking for them.
Father, is there anything that we as Catholics can do to either show our discontent or our anger? It started, of course, with the Notre Dame debacle, and then this Sister Carol Keenan, the CEO of the Catholic Health Organization, she backed the Obama health care, which is a slap in the face to the pro-life belief of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and just so that people understand why, it's not just about the health care. It's about the removal of the right of conscience to not have to do abortions. Some doctors and nurses may have to leave the profession because they'll be required to do abortions. And if their conscience doesn't allow them to do so, they'll have to stop being doctors and nurses. And it's the same thing with some pharmacists who don't want to distribute birth control and abortifacients and a variety of other things. So there's a variety of difficulties with the political aspect, but I would comment on the moral aspect. And the best thing that we can do is say to write to sister and to write to anybody else and say, look, give not just an expression of anger, but a reasoned, laid out kind of presentation saying, this is what's wrong with this. And our conscience is not being respected. Our conscience is being violated, and the conscience of our medical staff is being violated. And I ask you to rescind your support for such a law that would not give respect for conscience. Same thing now with the president's new initiative, where even though Congress voted to stop stem cell research, he's got it going again because he went through the courts, the dictatorial courts. And so this is something that, we want to see the moral decisions being made, and, that you can't kill babies in the womb in order to take parts of their body, even if they're tiny parts. You're still killing them to do this. And we have to be against that. This is a horrible precedent. And so these are the kind of moral issues we have to lay out and say, look, this is why we have to be against this form of health care. At least that particular form of the bill. Okay? All right. All right. Now we are on paragraph 45. And this is where he talks about how consecrated life should be an image of the apostolic community. That is, the community of the apostles at the time of the Acts of the Apostles. He begins, the fraternal life plays a fundamental role in the spiritual journey of consecrated persons. And it does so both for their constant renewal. They need fraternal life. I mean, I don't live with the community right now because there's no Jesuit that lives in Birmingham. But I keep contact with my communities, by phone conversations and keep in contact with the brothers back in Chicago. And also for full accomplishment of the mission in the world. We need, the rest of the members of the community to perform our mission. This is evident from the theological motivations that sustain community life. There are theological reasons that, for sustaining community life, because the community needs the other members. And that need and dependence upon other members of the community is part of our theology of where two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst. Christ taught us this kind of theology of the importance of community. And also, experience confirms it. So the experience of having, and again, most of my Jesuit experience has been when living with community. And it's something that we need. For instance, at a university or a high school, we need the whole community to be involved in the work. And as a whole community, we give a witness. I therefore exhort consecrated men and women to commit themselves to strengthening the fraternal life. So that's one of the things that he wants them to do, that consecrated people should strengthen the fraternal life together. And following the example of the first Christians in Jerusalem. Now, these first Christians were assiduous. That is, they were strongly faithful and accepting a number of things. What was it that gave them a fraternal life? What gave them community life? First, the teaching of the apostles. As a matter of fact, we see this in Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, which is the communion, to the breaking of bread, the Eucharist, and to the prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they sold their possessions and goods and distributed them to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they partook of food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the number day by day those who were being saved. So, to summarize what it says in that text, they accepted the teaching of the apostles. Now, this is something that communities have to do, accept the gospel. That's the teaching of the apostles, as it's written down in the epistles and the gospels. Secondly, they have common prayer, that they were in communion with each other in common prayer, reading the Psalms and other prayers together, both at home and in the temple. And also celebrating the Eucharist. This is one of the things that should characterize religious communities, that they celebrate Mass on a regular basis together. And for instance, our house, when I lived last in Dallas, a lot of our men had to go to parishes or say Mass at the school where we lived. But once a week, we got together for Mass just among ourselves, so that not only were we nourishing other people by celebrating Mass, but we came back together to celebrate Mass in the community and nourished one another by our sermons and by our witness and our praying together and receiving Jesus together. And in sharing whatever goods of nature and grace they had. And that's one of the things about community life, is that part of the vow of poverty is that you have everything in common. What you have doesn't belong to any individual, belongs to the whole community. Above all, I call men and women religious and members of societies of apostolic life to show generous mutual love, expressing it in ways that are in keeping with the nature of each institute, so that loving one another is something that should be very much seen in the communities. And again, it's not just that you're living in the same place like a hotel. That's not the goal. Just like it's not a goal in a family where you live in the same building, but you don't love one another. No, you have to have a real love for each other and go out of your way to show that love to each other and accept it from one another. And also, that every community should be revealed as a luminous sign of the New Jerusalem. Now, the New Jerusalem is the symbol for heaven. And he cites Revelation chapter 21, verse 3, which said, I heard a voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them. So, the way that they show love for one another should also be something that is shown in the way that they love each other and show the love of God. So that God's love for them is made manifest in the way that they show love for one another. And again, that should be true in family. That the love that God has for each member of the family should also be something that spills over back to the other members of the family. Well, this is true in religious life. The whole church greatly depends on the witness of communities. And this is something that he based on Acts chapter 13, verse 52, which said the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. So the church needs communities that are filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit and show that joy. And, earlier this year, I had the sisters from the community of Dominicans of Our Lady of the Eucharist. And joy characterizes them. They're so happy. When I was also in Nashville, Tennessee, I got to teach Bible classes for the Nashville Dominicans. And the same thing was true there. The community was filled with joy. There are a number of communities I go to, the sister servants, who sometimes you see at morning mass, they have a convent and a retreat house nearby. There's a joy among them. And that joy that they show is something that just is manifest and is a delight to be around. And they're laughing, they're enjoying each other's company, and they love their work. This is a great witness. And it should be the witness of every family and of every Christian community. The church wishes to hold up before the world the example of communities in which solitude is overcome through concern for one another. And by solitude, he doesn't just mean where you're alone in prayer, but where there's loneliness. That the loneliness of the community should be overcome by concern for one another. Now, it's not always easy. Sometimes members of the community are so caught up in themselves, and it's very difficult, for them to get out of their personality. That can happen. But the rest of the members of the community need to make an obligation, or have an obligation, to try to reach out to such members. And communication inspires in everyone a sense of shared responsibility. That as you do communicate with one another, you feel responsibility for each other. Again, when, like I mentioned, this man who was 81 years old in our community, we had a responsibility for him to check up on him, make sure. As a matter of fact, in one of our communities where there were a lot of older men, they had a buddy system. If they didn't see their buddy down at breakfast, they'd go up and knock on his door to make sure he didn't die in the night. Or is not sick. So that communication means responsibility for each other. And that's very important. And in which wounds are healed through forgiveness, because there's, even among nuns and priests, there's need, you hurt one another, and there's need for forgiveness. And each person's commitment to communion is strengthened, so that everybody feels a greater sense of communion. Now, remember, each community has its own charism. Jesuits are not like Franciscans, and they're not like Dominicans or Augustinians. Each order has its own charism, and each one is different and distinct. But even though they are so distinct, that means that they have to direct their energies in a way that fits with that charism, so that they're going to show love for each other according to that charism. And they're going to sustain the fidelity to the order. I mean, a lot of people might feel tempted to leave religious life. Well, you need help in being sustained in your fidelity, just like you do in marriage. Sometimes the kids can drive you so nuts you want to run away. That can happen. After 8 hours of talking to kids all day, you're screaming for an adult conversation, right? And so, but that's when your spouse has to help you to sustain that fidelity, that you're committed to those kids. And also to direct the apostolic work toward the one mission, and that the mission of the community has this priority. If the church is to reveal her true face to the world, she urgently needs fraternal communities. She needs communities where people show love for each other, which by their very existence contribute to the new evangelization, inasmuch as they disclose in a concrete way the fruitfulness of the new commandment. Now remember, what does he mean by the new commandment? A new commandment I give you, love one another as I have loved you. Now, he wants the communities to show their own love for the members and live out that new commandment. And by doing so, they'll be doing the new evangelization. Now, what does he mean by the new evangelization? This means that in countries that have traditionally been Christian, there's a need to re-evangelize. We need to preach the gospel again, because so many times people that were raised Catholic and raised Christian have gone lukewarm, or they don't care about their faith. They don't want to live out their Catholic faith anymore. And so we have to evangelize them. Well, one of the ways we'll evangelize them is by living out the new commandment, to love one another. And that won't be just something you say as words. It's something that you show in deeds. Now, paragraph 46. Sentire cum ecclesia. Now, that's a Latin phrase that means to think with the church. Okay? Now, he starts off this paragraph, giving some basic introduction. A great task belongs to consecrated life in light of the teaching about the church as communion. See, it's very easy to think about the church as an organization. It's easy just to think that the church is a big corporation and all they care about is money. A lot of people say that, right? Yeah, see, you guys are laughing. I bet some of you said it. That's not what the church is about. It's about being in communion with each other, and communion with God first, and in communion with the other members of the church. And this is what the Vatican Council was trying to get at. Consecrated persons are asked to be true experts of communion. If they live out community life, that should help them to be experts in communion and to practice the spirituality of communion. Now, this is something from the Congregation for Religious and Secular Institutes, Religious and Human Promotion, where it says, experts in communion, religious are therefore called to be an ecclesial community in the church and in the world, witnesses and architects for the plan of unity, which is the crowning point of human history and God's design. So, this is something that is very important, that communion is the crowning point that God has in mind for all of us. Why? The Blessed Trinity is a communion. 3 persons in one God. And that's the model for us. And that's one of the things that is the key teaching of John Paul the Great, that he wants us to understand that we are to live like the Blessed Trinity. And we cannot do it unless the grace of the Blessed Trinity is given to us. We need that grace. Now, the sense of ecclesial communion, developing into a spirituality of communion, a spirituality that focuses not on the organizational structure of the church, but on communion among the members of the church. This promotes a way of thinking, speaking, and acting, which enables the church to grow in depth and extension. And the life of communion, in fact, becomes a sign for all the world. As a matter of fact, this is from a document that we dealt with earlier called Christi Fidelis Laici. Thus, the life of the church communion, in paragraph 32, the life of the church communion will become a sign for all the world and a compelling force that will lead persons to faith in Christ, that they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, and that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. In such a way, communion leads to mission, and mission itself to communion. In other words, when you grow into communion, you want to share with others. That's where the mission comes in. You want to go outside so that you want people to join the church. But then when you go out, you want to draw them into communion, not just into membership of an organization. This is not like joining the Elks. It's not like joining the Moose. Not that those are bad organizations necessarily, but it's not the same. We're called to another level of communion beyond organization. Now, there are founders and foundresses of the orders that we see a constant and lively sense of the church. And that the people who founded the religious orders loved the church. That's one of the key things that he notices about them. And they manifest their full participation in all aspects of the church's life. They were obedient to the bishops, especially to the Roman pontiff, to the Pope. And against this background of love toward Holy Church, which is the pillar and the bulwark of the truth. That's from 1 Timothy 3:15, that the church is the pillar and the bulwark of the truth. We readily understand the devotion of St. Francis of Assisi for the Lord Pope. And our St. Catherine of Siena called the Pope Sweet Christ on Earth. St. Ignatius Loyola called us to Sentire cum Ecclesia, think with the church. And St. Teresa of Avila said, I'm a daughter of the church. And St. Teresa of Child Jesus said, in the heart of the church we are. May God bless us in this. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.